I'm sharing this story at the request of longtime followers. It's about a woman named Sophie, who grew up in a fractured home, raised by her father and stepmother in a small town just outside Boulder, Colorado. Now 28, Sophie is quiet, thoughtful, and seemingly independent, but there's a secret she's carried for years. One that involves Liam, her stepbrother. When Sophie's parents divorced, she was just 7. Her mother, battling chronic illness and living paycheck to paycheck, gave up custody. Her father quickly remarried a woman with a son from a previous relationship, Liam, who was 4 years older and rarely around. Sophie never bonded with her stepmother and certainly not with Liam. He would only visit during school breaks, and when he did, he always seemed distant, uninterested, and strangely polite. She hated his presence. To her, he was an intruder, occupying her space, sharing her table, and most importantly, taking away what little attention she got from her emotionally unavailable father. But something shifted years later, after college, when both Sophie and Liam ended up living in Denver, he working in finance, she freelancing as a designer. Their paths began crossing more often, family gatherings, birthdays, and occasional errands for their aging parents. Sophie had never been in a serious relationship. Truthfully, she never wanted one. The idea of marriage and children seemed foreign and messy, something only people with clean emotional histories could want. She found solace in solitude, routines, and work. But Liam, steadfast, thoughtful, surprisingly funny, began tugging at something buried deep inside. Still, she never imagined saying anything. He was her stepbrother, after all. Even if there was no blood relation, the label alone was enough to knot her stomach. Yet the way he made her feel, seen, safe, and strangely whole, was undeniable. The turning point came one fall weekend. Sophie had been struggling silently with freelance burnout and a recent creative slump. She hadn't told anyone. On a whim, her father suggested she join a family group hike in the Rocky Mountain National Park, something they hadn't done in years. Liam would be there too. She almost said no, but when her dad casually mentioned Liam had taken the day off to come, she agreed. The hike was scenic, the air crisp, the trees ablaze with gold. Sophie stayed quiet most of the way, but Liam walked beside her, matching her pace. When the group reached a small creek with a narrow log bridge, Sophie hesitated. Her legs froze, her chest tightened. A fear she never shared with anyone, bridges and water, gripped her. Liam noticed instantly. "Take your time," he said gently. "I'll go with you." "No, it's stupid," she muttered. "It's not." She tried to cross. Halfway through, her foot slipped on the damp log, and in a flash, she lost her balance. Before she could panic, Liam lunged, grabbing her arm. But the sudden motion caused them both to fall. The water wasn't deep, just knee-high, but it was icy cold, and Sophie scraped her leg on a submerged rock. He helped her up, wrapped his jacket around her, and carried her back to the main path without hesitation. She kept telling him to put her down, but he didn't listen. She couldn't stop shivering, partly from the cold, partly from the adrenaline of the fall, and the overwhelming closeness. Later that night, back at her apartment, Sophie replayed everything. The fall. His arms. The way he looked at her afterward, not like a sibling. Something else. She texted him. Thanks for today. For everything. His reply came quickly. Always. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. The next morning, Sophie woke up with a dull ache in her knee and an even heavier weight in her chest. The fall during yesterday's hike had left her bruised, but what lingered wasn't just physical. Liam hadn't said much after helping her back. He made sure she was okay, then returned to his own car and drove off. They hadn't spoken since. Later that afternoon, Sophie's phone buzzed. Liam, how's your leg? She replied with a photo of the scraped skin and a sarcastic caption. Model material. He responded with a laughing emoji, then. Still looks better than my hiking boots. Want coffee? She didn't hesitate. Yes. They met at a quiet cafe near Wash Park. Sophie limped in, bundled in a hoodie, her wet hair tucked into a beanie. Liam stood when he saw her, holding the door with that same effortless gentleness. They talked for hours. About everything and nothing. He told her about a project at work that was driving him nuts. She confessed that she hadn't drawn anything personal in nearly 3 months. He noticed the way her eyes lingered on him between sips of coffee, and she noticed that he'd shaved that morning. On the way out, she tripped slightly on the curb. Okay, he said, this is becoming a pattern. Next time, bubble wrap. Sophie laughed and smacked his arm lightly. As he walked her to her car, silence fell between them again, the charged kind. Before she could think too hard, she turned to him and blurted, Liam, do you ever think about how weird this is? He tilted his head. You mean us? She nodded, cheeks burning. Yeah. I mean, you're my stepbrother. Technically. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he looked up at the overcast sky and exhaled. I think about it all the time. Sophie's heart thudded. Liam continued, I've spent years trying to file you away in the off-limits folder. You were my little sister, right? That's how Dad saw you. That's how I was supposed to see you. But then you grew up. And you weren't that girl anymore. She looked at him. So what are we now? He gave a crooked smile. That's what I'm trying to figure out. She hesitated. I don't want to be someone you help out of obligation. Or someone you feel guilty for caring about. He stepped closer, brushing her arm with his fingertips. Sophie, if I didn't care, I wouldn't have jumped into a freezing river yesterday to catch you. The moment stretched. Then she whispered, Why did you? He chuckled. Because when I saw you slip, something in me just moved. I didn't think. I just went after you. Her eyes welled up with something between confusion and warmth. He reached for her hand. Look, I don't know where this is going. But I do know one thing. She met his gaze. I don't want to pretend anymore. Sophie bit her lip. So, what now? Liam shrugged. Let's start by having dinner. No hiking. No falling. Just us. She smiled, hard hammering. Okay. And as she drove home that evening, she realized something. The scariest fall she had taken wasn't off that log bridge. It was right here, into something uncertain, fragile, and completely real. For the next few days, everything between Sophie and Liam was warm and strange and new. They weren't officially anything, no titles, no declarations, but the way he texted her each morning with coffee? And how she always found herself saying yes, it felt like something real. Then one evening, as they sat across from each other at a Thai place tucked into a quiet street in Capitol Hill, Sophie noticed Liam picking at his food, unusually quiet. She leaned forward. "Is something on your mind?" He hesitated. Then, softly, "There's something I should have told you earlier." Her heart skipped. "Okay. I was married. Once." Sophie blinked. "What?" Liam nodded slowly. "When I lived in Boston. It was right after college. Her name was Claire. We got married quickly. Too quickly." Sophie didn't speak, letting the words settle. "It was one of those impulsive things you think will ground you," he continued. "But it just didn't work. We divorced last year." "Does your mom know?" she asked. "No. No one in my family knows." The noodles in her bowl suddenly didn't look appetizing anymore. She wasn't angry, just overwhelmed. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "I was afraid," he said honestly. "Afraid it'd scare you away. And, selfishly, afraid you'd think I was still carrying that baggage." Sophie looked at him. "Are you?" He took a breath. "No. I'm not. I was once, but it's done. We ended it clean. We haven't spoken in months." She bit her lip. "You should have told me earlier." "I know," he said. "And I'm sorry." She nodded, letting the silence hang for a moment before saying, "It doesn't change how I feel about you. But I need honesty from you. Always." He reached across the table and took her hand. "You have it." Later that night, they sat side by side on Sophie's couch. A movie played in the background, but neither was really watching. "I was terrified when I sent you that text to come hiking," Liam admitted, eyes on the screen. "Why?" she asked, curled into his shoulder. "Because I knew if we spent a full day together again, I wouldn't be able to pretend anymore. I'd want more." She smiled. "You're dramatic." He smirked. "You're the one who wrote a love letter and left it on a desk like a Jane Austen character." She sat up, mock offended. "That letter was heartfelt." "It was beautiful," he said softly. "It's what broke the dam for me." Sophie's heart twisted. "Then why didn't you say anything after you read it?" "I thought you might regret writing it. That maybe you'd written it in the moment, and once I acknowledged it, it'd become real and messy." "And now?" He looked at her, no smile this time. "Now I don't want to waste another day wondering what if." She leaned in, kissed him gently. "Then don't." That night, as they lay together under a throw blanket, Sophie whispered, "Do you think people like us, who grew up in broken homes, can really trust love?" Liam didn't answer right away. "Then, maybe love is the only thing we can trust, when everything else has let us down." She didn't reply. She just nestled closer, listening to the quiet beat of his heart and thinking, for once, that maybe she could believe in something. Maybe this time, love wouldn't break. Maybe it would hold. For weeks, everything was almost too perfect. Sophie and Liam fell into a rhythm, weeknight dinners at her apartment, weekend walks through the neighborhood farmers market, long talks under blankets as autumn settled over Denver. It felt domestic, peaceful. Sophie didn't remember the last time she felt this calm in someone's presence. But something in her had always braced for disappointment. That was the way she'd learned to survive, expect nothing, trust little. It started with a phone call. Sophie had just finished making dinner, rosemary chicken, Liam's favorite. He was running late. Again. She'd set the table, poured the wine, lit a candle. Her phone buzzed. It was her dad. "Hey, pumpkin. I just had lunch with Liam's mom today. Funny story, she said she's planning to introduce him to the daughter of one of her colleagues. Says they'd be a great match. He's clueless, of course." Sophie froze. "Wait," she said. "She doesn't know about us?" There was a pause. "Us?" "Me and Liam." "You and Sophie, what are you talking about?" She ended the call before she could hear any more. That night, when Liam finally arrived, her dinner was cold, and she was pacing. "You didn't tell your mom," she said. He dropped his bag. "What?" "She's trying to set you up. My dad just called." Liam let out a slow breath and ran a hand through his hair. "I was going to tell her." "When?" "I just needed the right moment." "There's no right moment, Liam. There's just telling the truth or hiding." His voice was quiet. "You think I'm hiding you?" "I think." She paused. "I think you're afraid." "Of what it looks like." "Of what people will say." "Of admitting you're with your stepsister." "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" He stepped closer, his eyes steady. "It's real. And I've never had anything like this. But Sophie, I've spent most of my life managing everyone else's expectations, my mom's, your dad's, even yours. I just wanted to hold on to this a little longer before it gets complicated." Sophie's eyes stung. "It's already complicated." They stood there, tension like static in the air between them. He reached for her hand. "I'm sorry. I'll tell her. Tomorrow." But Sophie pulled back. It shouldn't have taken this. The next day, she didn't text him. Or the next. By day 3, her resolve was cracking. She missed him, the quiet presence, the teasing glances, the way he said her name like it meant something sacred. But she needed him to choose this without being forced. Then, that evening, she opened her apartment door and found him standing there with a grocery bag and that familiar sheepish grin. "I told her," he said, holding up a bottle of wine. "It went about how you'd expect." Shock. Disapproval. Silence. Sophie stared. "And then," he continued, she said, "if you're going to ruin your life, at least pick someone who cooks well." Sophie blinked. "She said that?" "She did." "Then she asked if you like Riesling." Sophie laughed through the tightness in her chest. You actually did it. I wasn't going to lose you over a dinner conversation. She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around him, and whispered, You still might. He kissed her temple. Then I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn my place. They didn't talk about the future that night, not in timelines or family labels. But they ate together, drank wine on the couch, and somewhere between shared laughter and tired eyes, Sophie allowed herself to believe in something deeper. Love, she realized, wasn't always loud or poetic. Sometimes, it was showing up. Late. Nervous. Holding wine. And meaning it. A week later, Sophie found herself standing in her childhood kitchen, staring down at a pot of boiling water like it held the answers to everything. Her dad had invited her over for Sunday dinner, something he hadn't done in years. His voice on the phone had been too casual. Too friendly. She knew something was coming. Liam arrived 10 minutes after she did, dressed like he was trying too hard not to impress anyone. Clean jeans. A button-down. Sweater over the shoulders. Sophie gave him a tight-lipped smile as he walked in. I feel like I'm about to be interrogated, he whispered. You're not wrong. Sophie's dad sat at the table, scrolling through something on his phone, pretending not to notice the palpable tension in the room. When dinner was served, he cleared his throat. So, he said, you two are a thing now? Sophie nearly dropped her fork. Liam answered first. Yes, sir. Her dad raised an eyebrow. You know, I used to joke that I was raising two kids from different worlds under the same roof. Never imagined they'd fall for each other. Sophie braced herself. But, you're adults, he added. And if this is what makes you both happy. He looked at Sophie, then Liam. Then who am I to stand in the way? Sophie blinked. That's it? What were you expecting? A dramatic scene? He chuckled. Don't worry, your stepmother's handling that part. Liam shifted awkwardly. She's not taking it well? She's confused. She thinks you're taking advantage of Sophie. Sophie scoffed. Of course she does. But, her dad said, holding up a hand, I told her Sophie doesn't let anyone walk over her. And frankly, I've never seen either of you more at ease. Sophie felt a slow warmth rise in her chest. Thanks, Dad. Just don't break each other's hearts. I can handle family drama. I can't handle seeing either of you fall apart. The rest of the evening passed with cautious peace. Not quite comfortable, but no longer icy. That night, when Liam walked Sophie to her car, she let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. That could have gone so much worse. He smiled. You were amazing. I didn't even say anything. Exactly. You didn't flinch. You let me stand beside you. That means everything to me. She slipped her fingers through his. So what now? Are we official? Liam chuckled. You want to update your relationship status on Facebook? I was thinking something more romantic. Like publicly committed but still private about what it means. Sounds like us. They stood there under the street lamp, hands intertwined, breathing in the late November air. And then, as if life had perfect timing, Sophie's phone buzzed. A message from her stepmother. "We need to talk. Soon." Sophie locked the screen without reading further. "Everything okay?" Liam asked. "No," she said, tucking the phone in her coat pocket. "But it will be." She looked at him, steady and warm beside her, the boy who once felt like a stranger across the hallway, now the man who made her believe in the idea of home. "If I'm choosing this," she said, "I'm choosing all of it. The mess, the noise, the stares. I just want to be with you." Liam leaned in, brushing his lips against hers. "Then let's stop asking permission." Sophie hadn't returned to her childhood home in months, but the porch light still flickered the same way it always had, a soft, erratic blink that reminded her of things left unresolved. She stood outside the door for a moment before knocking. Her stepmother, Marjorie, opened the door. As usual, she looked polished, pressed blouse, manicured nails, not a strand of hair out of place. Sophie felt the heat creep up her neck the moment their eyes met. Marjorie stepped aside. "Come in." The living room hadn't changed. Neutral colors. A crystal vase. Her father's business books lined the shelf like decoration. Sophie sat on the edge of the couch, posture rigid. Marjorie didn't waste time. "You and Liam?" Sophie nodded. "Yes." There was a long silence. Then Marjorie said, "I always knew you had a strange attachment to him." Sophie's jaw tightened. "I didn't plan this." "Neither did he." "That doesn't make it any less complicated." "I know." Marjorie crossed her arms. "You're making a spectacle of our family. People will talk. His colleagues will talk. Your father's clients might talk. Have you thought about any of that?" Sophie exhaled slowly. "All my life, I've let what other people think decide what I do. I'm done with that." Marjorie looked at her for a long time, her eyes searching for a crack. "You really love him?" "I do." "And he loves you?" "Yes." Marjorie turned, walked to the window. "Do you know how long I've watched you try to disappear in this house? You never made it easy to care for you." Sophie swallowed hard. "You never made it easy to be cared for." Another silence. Then, surprisingly, Marjorie's voice softened. "You're not the little girl sulking in the hallway anymore." "No," Sophie said. "I'm not." "Does he make you happy?" Sophie thought of Liam's warmth, the way he laughed when he cooked, the way he pulled her close when she shivered in the night. "Yes," she said. Marjorie turned back to her. "Then make it work." Quietly. Sophie blinked. "What?" "I'm not blessing it," Marjorie said, waving a hand, "but I'm not fighting it. I've spent too many years pretending family means control. It doesn't." That was probably the closest thing to approval Sophie would ever get. She stood, her voice steady. "Thanks for not asking me to give him up." Marjorie gave a weary nod. "Thanks for not asking me to celebrate it." That night, Sophie returned to Liam's place. He was in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, chopping garlic. She slipped behind him, wrapped her arms around his waist. "How'd it go?" he asked, without turning. "She didn't throw anything at me." "That's progress." "She told me I was hard to love." Liam paused his chopping, turned to her. "She's wrong." Sophie smiled against his chest. "I know. That's why I'm here." They ate dinner in pajamas, on the floor, music playing low in the background. And when Liam offered her the spare key again, she didn't hesitate this time. She accepted. Later, while lying in bed, limbs tangled beneath the sheets, Sophie whispered, "Do you think people like us get to have normal love?" Liam brushed a strand of hair from her face. "No." She looked up, startled. "But I think we get something better. We get the kind of love we built ourselves. No blueprints. No shortcuts. Just real." She nodded, her heart full. And for the first time in her life, Sophie didn't feel like she was fighting for a place to belong. She had it. Right here. In his arms. By early December, Sophie had officially moved into Liam's apartment in Lohi, a sun-filled loft with too many coffee mugs and not enough closet space. At first, everything felt like a dream. Waking up tangled in sheets together. Brushing their teeth side by side. Grocery shopping on Sundays. She would catch herself smiling while folding his socks or finding her toothbrush next to his, like love had finally taken shape in the smallest, quietest ways. But real life has a way of testing even the softest beginnings. It started with the towels. "You put the damp one on top of the dry one," Sophie said one evening, standing in front of the bathroom door, holding both towels like evidence in a court trial. Liam blinked at her from the couch. Okay?" She sighed. "It just stays wet longer that way." He laughed. "All right, towel police. I'll reform." But there were more moments like that. Dishes left half-rinsed. Her hair ties mysteriously disappearing. His tendency to scroll through work emails in bed while she wanted to cuddle in silence. One morning, after a tense conversation about kitchen organization, Sophie had rearranged the spice rack again. Liam muttered, "You know, for someone so independent, you've got a lot of rules." She froze. "What's that supposed to mean?" He looked up, immediately regretting his tone. "Nothing. This is new for me too, okay?" She turned away, her voice quiet. "You make me feel like I'm hard to live with." Liam stood and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "You're not. I'm just used to being alone. I need time to adjust." She leaned into his chest. "Me too. I've never lived with someone who actually mattered." They were learning. Not just about each other's quirks, but about themselves. How to argue without raising their voices. How to apologize. How to laugh at the absurdity of fighting over sock drawers and who used the last of the almond milk. Then came the trip. "Let's get away for New Year's," Liam suggested one night as they sat on the couch in sweatpants, eating takeout. "Somewhere snowy." Sophie raised an eyebrow. "Like a cabin in the woods? Where you chop firewood and I pretend to like hiking?" He smirked. "Exactly. Except we'll also bring wine, heated blankets, and zero expectations. They booked a small Airbnb in Breckenridge, a two-bedroom cabin tucked beneath towering pines. On the drive up, they listened to old playlists and played dumb car games. For the first time in weeks, Sophie felt like they were just Sophie and Liam again, no step labels, no opinions from relatives, no awkward towel fights. That night, snow fell softly outside as they made dinner together in the tiny cabin kitchen. Afterward, they curled up by the fireplace, a bottle of wine between them, and watched the flames flicker like old memories burning down. Liam pulled her closer. "This is the life I want." She looked at him, unsure if he meant the trip or something bigger. He answered without her asking. "I mean us. This. You. Every morning. Every messy sock drawer. Every time you reorganized the pantry." She laughed. "Even the spices?" "Especially the spices." She leaned her head against his chest. "Then I guess I'll have to keep showing up." "I'm counting on it." Outside, midnight snow blanketed the ground in silence. Inside, they made a quiet promise, one they didn't speak out loud, but both felt deep in their bones. This wasn't just a winter fling. It was a life they were slowly, stubbornly, tenderly building. When they returned from Breckenridge, the snow in Denver had turned to slush. The romantic fog of their trip lingered just long enough to soften the return to routine: morning coffee, silent breakfasts before work, small smiles exchanged at the door. But real life, as it often does, had plans of its own. It started with a message. Sophie was prepping dinner one evening, seared salmon, roasted carrots, her comfort food, when she heard Liam's phone buzz on the counter behind her. She didn't mean to glance at it. But the name flashed clearly on the screen. Claire, Boston. His ex-wife. She froze, mid-slice, the knife suspended above a carrot. Liam walked in a moment later, setting his keys down. "Smells amazing." Sophie turned slowly. "Claire texted you." He stopped. Blinked. "Yeah. I wasn't going to bring it up." "You weren't?" "She just said she was in town for a few days. Visiting friends. Wanted to catch up." Sophie swallowed. "Are you going to see her?" Liam hesitated too long. "I wasn't sure," he said. "I thought maybe I'd ask you first." Sophie looked at him, hard. "Why? What is there to catch up on?" "It's not like that. We were together a long time. There's closure we never really got." The word closure stung more than she expected. "So you want to go see her?" "I didn't say that." "But you didn't say no." He stepped forward. "Sophie. I love you. I'm not going back to her. But some part of me just needs to see the chapter close properly." Sophie felt the sting of pride and fear flare in her chest. "You already closed it. You chose me." "I did," he said firmly. "But you don't spend years with someone and just erase them." Sophie turned back to the cutting board and resumed slicing. The carrots hit the counter harder than before. "Do what you need to do, Liam." He met Claire 2 days later. He told Sophie everything: time, place, even offered to show her the text thread. She waved him off. "I'm not that girl," she'd said. But alone in the apartment, she couldn't stop thinking about it. About a version of Liam that once belonged to someone else. About a history she couldn't touch. When he came back that night, he was quiet. She didn't ask, not at first. But as they sat side by side in bed, reading, she closed her book and turned to him. "How was it?" He looked at her. "Brief. Honest. Did it help?" He nodded. "Yeah. It reminded me of who I was back then. And who I'm not now." Sophie tried to smile, but it faltered. "Were you tempted?" "No," he said immediately. "Not even a little." She studied him. "Why not?" "Because I kept thinking about how I'd feel if I lost you." She felt the breath leave her chest. He leaned in, brushing his forehead against hers. "You're not a rebound, Sophie. You're the reason I know I can do better. Be better." A tear slid down her cheek. "I was so scared." "I know. And I hate that I was. I love that you were. Because it means this matters." He kissed her, slow, tender, grounding. Then, without hesitation, he whispered, "I love you." She froze. "I've been meaning to say it since Breckenridge," he added, smiling shyly. But that seemed cliché. She let out a breath that turned into a laugh. "I love you too." It wasn't perfect. It wasn't poetic. But it was honest. And maybe that's all love ever needs to be. For days after that night, Sophie walked through the world as if wrapped in sunlight. "He loves me." The words echoed in her mind with every mundane task, folding laundry, rinsing coffee cups, watching his back as he brushed his teeth. It wasn't just that he said it, it was that she believed it. And that scared her. Because belief, for someone like Sophie, always came with risk. It was a quiet Saturday morning when the fear returned. They were lying on the couch, her legs over his lap, an old movie playing in the background. Liam, half listening, scrolled casually through his phone. "I talked to Sam last night," he said, glancing up. "Your college roommate?" Sophie asked. "Yeah. He and his wife just had their second kid. Said I should come visit." Sophie smiled politely, but something inside her tensed. Liam noticed. "You okay?" She nodded too quickly. "Yeah. Just tired." But she wasn't. The image of Liam holding someone else's baby, his baby, flickered in her mind like a memory from someone else's life. She didn't know how to hold that image next to hers. Later, in the kitchen, while Liam napped on the couch, she stared into a steaming mug of tea, her thoughts unraveling. She'd always told herself she didn't want marriage. Or kids. Or anything that resembled the family she came from. But with Liam, everything felt possible. And terrifying. That night, over dinner, she said it out loud. "Do you ever think about having a family?" Liam looked up from his plate, surprised. "Like us?" "No, I mean kids. Marriage. All that." He set his fork down. "Sometimes. Not in any immediate way. But yeah, I've thought about it. With the right person. She swallowed. I don't know if I can do that. His expression didn't change, but his voice softened. Okay. Tell me what you mean. I mean. She paused, searching for words. What if I screw it up? What if I become like my parents? What if I bring a child into the world and can't love them right? What if I'm too broken for that kind of life? Liam reached across the table and took her hand. Sophie. You've survived things most people couldn't even talk about. You are not broken. You're someone who had to become strong when she should have been allowed to be soft. That's not a flaw. That's resilience. She looked away, her throat tightening. But what if I'm scared forever? Then I'll hold your hand forever. They sat in silence for a moment, her hand small in his thumb tracing circles on her skin. I don't need you to promise me marriage or kids, Liam said quietly. I just need you to promise you won't run when it gets hard. Sophie met his gaze. I promise. That night, they lay in bed facing each other, the world quiet outside their window. Snow had started to fall again, soft, silent, steady. I had a dream once, Sophie whispered. That I was in a kitchen, holding a little girl. And she looked up at me and said, Mommy, are you sure you love me? And I woke up sobbing because I couldn't answer. Liam tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Do you know what I dream about? What? You. In that same kitchen. Laughing. Hair messy. Wearing one of my t-shirts and dancing barefoot with a cup of coffee. She smiled, tears wetting her lashes. I want to be her. I want to be that version of me. You already are. And just like that, the fear didn't disappear, but it shrank. Just a little. Love wouldn't fix everything. But maybe, just maybe, it could help her begin again. Spring came late to Denver that year. By mid-April, snow still clung to rooftops in the early mornings before melting into the streets by noon. Sophie had come to love these in-between days, the soft sun on her face, Liam's jacket around her shoulders, the way the world felt like it was thawing with her. One Sunday afternoon, they were wandering through the local Cherry Creek art market, fingers entwined, sipping coffee. Sophie stopped in front of a ceramic sculpture, a woman standing alone in the wind, hair swept back but face calm. She reminds me of you, Liam said, nudging her arm. Stoic and full of inner turmoil? He laughed. Strong. Rooted. Facing everything that tries to knock her down. Sophie leaned into him. Poetic, aren't you? They bought the sculpture. But the peace of that day didn't last long. 2 nights later, Liam came home late, his jaw tense. Sophie had already changed into pajamas, curled up on the couch reading. She looked up. You okay? He hesitated. Then sat beside her. I got a call from Boston. Sophie's heart skipped. It's not Claire, he added quickly. It's from a firm I used to work with, Redmond Partners. They want me to come back. To lead a new international project. She went still. It would be 6 months. Maybe more. A huge opportunity. Double the pay. Global travel. Anne. He looked at her. I haven't said yes. Sophie exhaled. But you're thinking about it. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. Silence. The kind that fills a room like fog. Sophie stared at her hands. So what happens to us? He took her hand, held it tight. I want us. Wherever I go. But I don't want to ask you to wait unless you want to. I've spent so long choosing what's safe. I don't want to be the guy who leaves and assumes you'll still be here. Sophie stood, paced slowly, heart racing. You left Boston for a reason. For yourself. For me. And I'm not undoing that, he said. This isn't about running back. It's about proving I can do more. Be more. For both of us. She wanted to scream why now, but she didn't. Because deep down, she knew what ambition meant to someone like him. She shared it, even if hers lived in sketches and screen time, not boardrooms and transatlantic calls. She turned toward him. Let me ask you one thing. Anything. If you go, are you going as a man in a relationship, our relationship, or as someone who's leaving it behind? Liam didn't flinch. I go as your partner. 100%. Then, she said quietly, you should go. He blinked. Sophie. I won't hold you back from something you've earned. I love you too much for that. He stood, stepped forward, cupped her face gently. I'll fly back every 2 weeks. We'll FaceTime. I'll write you letters if I have to. You better. That night, they held each other like the world was shifting beneath them. Because it was. The day he left, she stood with him at the airport, watched the planes rise beyond the glass, a lump forming in her throat. Last chance to run away to Europe with me, he joked, brushing her cheek. She smiled, tears clinging to her lashes. Go chase the life you want. I'll be here, building mine. And when we meet in the middle again, we'll both be whole, he finished. He kissed her, deep and slow, and walked toward his gate. Sophie stood there long after he disappeared from view. It wasn't heartbreak. It was something braver. Hope. The first few weeks were harder than Sophie had admitted to anyone, including herself. Liam's absence clung to the apartment like a missing heartbeat. His coffee mug still sat by the sink. His shoes were lined up by the door like he might walk through it any second. His sweatshirt, oversized and worn, hung off the back of her desk chair, and Sophie found herself slipping it on more nights than not. They texted every morning. They FaceTimed every other night. But something was shifting. The first time Liam missed a call, he apologized profusely. Client dinner ran long. You would have hated it. 5 forks. No real food. Sophie laughed it off. But when he missed 2 in a row, she didn't respond immediately. Not because she was angry, but because she was scared. Afraid that life was pulling them in different directions again. One night, after a late meeting, Sophie finally said it out loud during their video call. I don't want to be a bookmark in your life, Liam. He looked at her, blinking from across the screen. What? I don't want to be the thing you come back to when everything else is done. I want to be part of the story. He set down his glass of wine. You are the story, Sophie. She shook her head. Then why does it feel like I'm waiting on the sidelines? Liam was quiet. Then he leaned closer to the screen. I don't know how to do this. I'm trying. But I miss you in ways I don't even have words for. Then come home, she whispered, surprising herself. He didn't respond. And in that pause, those heavy 2 seconds, Sophie knew everything had changed. A week later, Sophie threw herself into work. Design clients piled up, projects she used to dream of. Her name was quietly becoming recognized, her work featured in a Denver design magazine, her inbox full of new inquiries. She should have been thrilled. But it all felt dull. Even the email she got on a Tuesday afternoon. Subject, feature request, Denver Creatives Rising, interview opportunity. She clicked on it, barely skimming. They wanted her for a cover profile. Her first instinct was to text Liam. But she didn't. Not because she didn't want to, but because she wasn't sure what he would say. Or if he'd say anything at all. That night, as she scrolled through her photo gallery, she found a picture they took in Breckenridge. Her hand in his. Snow on their shoulders. Their faces soft with something unspeakably warm. She held the screen to her chest and finally cried. Not out of heartbreak. Out of missing. And out of fear that love might not be enough. The next evening, her doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. Wearing sweats and mismatched socks, she opened the door, and there he was. Liam. Hair wind-tousled. Suitcase in one hand. A paper bag in the other. I brought dinner, he said. She stared at him, stunned. What are you? How are you here? I quit the job. What? I finished the handoff early, booked a flight, and left. They wanted me to stay longer, but I realized something. He stepped forward, voice low and steady. I didn't want to build a life that didn't have you in it. Not again. Not even for a promotion. What's the point of success if I'm eating takeout alone in a hotel? Sophie's chest was tight. You didn't even tell me. I didn't want to promise again. I wanted to show you. He dropped the suitcase, pulled her into his arms. I've been gone long enough. She melted into him, the smell of his coat, the sound of his breath, everything so familiar and real and immediate. As she pulled back, she whispered, You're late for dinner. He grinned. Then let me catch up. And just like that, he was home. The morning after Liam came home, Sophie woke to the smell of coffee, his kind, dark and strong and slightly too bitter. She followed the scent barefoot into the kitchen, where he stood in sweatpants and her apron, flipping pancakes with a smug grin. You cook now? She asked, still groggy. He turned, eyes crinkling. You live with someone long enough, you pick up a few things. Sophie leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, heart steady in a way it hadn't been for weeks. Are you really back? Liam looked at her. I'm really back. He meant it. She could see it in the way he moved, unhurried, certain. As if his life had finally caught up with his heart. They spent the next few days in a bubble. Cleaning out his suitcase. Rearranging the apartment so it felt like theirs again. Liam suggested they repaint the bedroom. Sophie bought fresh eucalyptus for the windowsill. It felt like building something, not just resuming it. Then one afternoon, Sophie got a phone call. It was from her gynecologist. A follow-up to a routine appointment she'd almost forgotten about. Nothing alarming, the nurse said. But we do recommend a follow-up scan. Just to be sure. Sophie's throat tightened. Sure about what? A shadow on the ultrasound, the nurse said gently. It's probably benign. But best to check. When she hung up, her hands were cold. That evening, she didn't say anything right away. Liam was humming in the kitchen, chopping garlic, the apartment lit in warm gold from the setting sun. She watched him for a long moment. Then, I have a doctor's appointment next Thursday. I want you to come. He stopped chopping. What's going on? They found something. Nothing serious. Just something they want to check again. Liam turned to her, voice low. Do you want to talk about it? She nodded. I'm scared. He put down the knife, walked to her, and wrapped his arms around her. I'll be there, he said. For every test. Every phone call. Every second. The following Thursday, they sat in a fluorescent waiting room, Liam holding her hand tighter than she expected. The scan was quiet, clinical. The results came later that week. Benign. Nothing to worry about. But for Sophie, the scare had cracked something open. That night, curled up in Liam's arms, she said quietly, what if it hadn't been okay? He didn't answer immediately. Then we would have handled it. Together. She looked at him. I've never let myself imagine growing old with someone. But now I can't stop. He smiled, kissed her hair. So start imagining. They lay in silence for a while, the kind of silence that feels like its own form of safety. Then Sophie said, if we ever had a child. Liam blinked. Yeah? I'd want them to grow up never doubting for a second that they're loved. He reached for her hand. Then they will. If that's what we want someday, they will. Sophie turned toward him. Not someday. Maybe not that far off. His eyes widened slightly. She added quickly, I'm not pregnant. But, for the first time, I don't hate the thought. Liam didn't speak. He just smiled, big and warm and a little teary-eyed. You'd be an incredible mom, he whispered. And you'd be the kind of dad who teaches them how to fold towels and organize spices alphabetically. He laughed. And read bedtime stories in ridiculous voices. They lay there, hearts open, dreams just beginning to take shape. No longer haunted by the families they came from. Only focused on the one they might one day create. Together. 6 months later, Sophie stood in the front yard of the house she once called home. The siding had faded, the front steps still chipped at the corner, just like she remembered. But everything else felt smaller. Quieter. Like the ghosts had grown tired of waiting for her return. She didn't come often. Her dad had sold the place and moved into a condo downtown. But the new owners, an older couple who ran an antique store, had reached out after finding a box in the attic with Sophie's name on it. It was dusty. Light. Marked in faded Sharpie, lemon, old stuff. Liam stood behind her, hands in his pockets. Ready? No, she said. But let's go. Inside, the air smelled like varnish and dried lavender. The owners had done a beautiful job, warm paint, plants by the window. Still, Sophie's steps echoed across the wooden floors, memory bouncing with every step. The box sat on the table. Nothing more than a time capsule from a life she barely remembered. She opened it slowly. Inside, a stack of hand-drawn comics she made in 5th grade. A letter to the Tooth Fairy that had never been sent. A Polaroid of her and Liam on the porch, years before anything had changed. And at the bottom, a crumpled, tear-stained piece of lined paper. Her handwriting. A note she had written to herself, maybe when she was 10 or 11. If no one ever says it, I'll just write it down myself, I am lovable. Even if I don't feel like it. Sophie's breath caught. Liam stepped closer, reading over her shoulder. Quiet. Still. Then, softly, you were always lovable. Even then. She wiped her eyes, smiled. Even with that haircut? He kissed the top of her head. Especially with that haircut. That night, they drove back to their apartment in silence. Not uncomfortable, just full. Sophie took a long shower and stepped out to find Liam standing in the living room, the lights dimmed. He was holding something behind his back. Do you know, he said slowly, that you changed the trajectory of my entire life? She wrapped herself in her robe, hair damp, heart racing. I think you changed mine first. He stepped closer, then pulled something from behind his back, a small velvet box. Sophie's heart stopped. He opened it. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a single sapphire flanked by 2 tiny diamonds. I know you're scared of what comes next, Liam said. So am I. But if we build it one quiet morning, one coffee mug, one fight over spices at a time, I think we'll be okay. Sophie's voice caught. Is this really happening? He knelt. I don't want a perfect life. I just want you. Will you marry me? She laughed through her tears. Liam. Say yes. I was always going to. And she did. Later that night, as they lay in bed, the ring a quiet weight on her hand, Sophie whispered, It's not about being whole before you love someone, is it? Liam pulled her closer. No. It's about loving someone while you become whole. And that, she realized, was what they had done. Slowly. Patiently. Bravely. Not perfectly. But beautifully. Together. It was summer when Sophie got the call. The antique shop owners were moving. Downsizing. The house, her house, was going on the market again. They remembered how tender she'd been the last time, how gently she handled that box of childhood remnants. So they offered one last look before they officially handed it over. At first, she said no. But something in her chest wouldn't let it go. And so, one Saturday morning, with Liam beside her and the air thick with memories and July heat, Sophie returned to the house that had both raised her and nearly broken her. The door creaked just like it used to. Inside, it was quiet. The couple had already moved most of their things out, leaving the house hollow and echoing like the inside of an old seashell. Sophie walked slowly through the rooms. The stairs were still narrow. The kitchen still had that weird scuff on the corner cabinet from where her dad had once kicked it in frustration. And the small room upstairs, the one that had been hers, still had a faint impression on the wall where her twin bed used to rest. She stood in the doorway, not speaking. Liam stayed behind her, letting her take it all in. Sophie whispered, "I used to sit on this floor with my back to that wall and try not to cry loud enough for anyone to hear." He didn't speak. He just slid his fingers through hers. "I used to write poems in the dark. About what it might feel like to be wanted. To be chosen. I imagined being held and believed and loved, and I told myself those things weren't meant for me." She turned to look at him, eyes glassy. "And now you're here." Liam's voice cracked. "I always will be." They walked through the rest of the house slowly, like ghosts revisiting their old skin. When they reached the back porch, Sophie stopped. "This is where I watched my mom drive away for the last time," she said. She didn't even wave. "I remember wishing she'd look back." Liam's hand found the small of her back. "She couldn't look back," he said gently. "Because she wasn't ready to face what she was leaving behind." Sophie stared out at the empty yard. "I used to hate this house." Liam was quiet. "But now I think I just hated who I was here," she added. "Small. Afraid. Forgettable." "You were never forgettable. I was never seen." She turned toward him, eyes steady now. "Until you." He stepped forward. "You're not that girl anymore." But she survived. And you owe her this moment. To say goodbye. Sophie nodded, swallowing a hard lump in her throat. She stepped down into the yard and walked toward the back fence, the one she used to lean on when she didn't want to go back inside. She turned around slowly, taking in the weathered siding, the creaky porch, the old screen door that once slammed shut behind her like a punishment. And then, softly, she whispered, "Thank you for giving me what you could. Thank you for teaching me how to find home in someone else. I forgive you. And I'm leaving now." Her voice didn't shake. Not once. She turned, walked back toward Liam. And didn't look back. That evening, they sat on their own patio, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. Sophie leaned her head against Liam's shoulder, bare feet curled beneath her. "Do you regret going?" he asked. "No," she said. "It was the last door I needed to close." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "So what door are we opening next?" She looked up at him, the warmth of love steady in her chest. "This one," she said. "Ours. Forever."